Hey everyone, it's Sevi. Welcome to my Feixiao guide where we'll be covering her kit and gameplay, Eidolons, Relic and Lightcone builds, team synergies, tips, and more to help you better understand our new general. And a quick note that the footage here is from the Creator Experience server, and its content seems to be quite up to date with the official server, so with that, let's get started. Feixiao is a 5-star Wind DPS that's incredibly strong and comes with her own unique ultimate charging mechanic, because rather than an energy system, she requires flying Aureus points to unleash her deadly ultimate, so we should first understand how it works. To start, she gains half an Aureus point for every attack action of any party member, counting herself. You can track this by the icon on her HUD, where it needs to fill both halves in order to gain 1 point. Additionally, after a teammate attacks, Feixiao can launch a coordinated follow-up attack against the main target or another random target if the main target is already gone. This follow-up attack also counts towards getting a half point. Note though that this can only trigger once per turn of Feixiao. Furthermore, this follow-up attack gives Feixiao a big damage percent bonus buff for 2 turns, which she'll easily maintain as she keeps on re-triggering it. Feixiao's skill attack then deals an instance of single target damage and also launches a follow-up attack. That's 2 attacks in a row, so each skill also gives 1 Aureus point by itself. In order to trigger her ultimate, you need to have at least 6 Aureus points. She can stack up to 12 Aureus points, but it technically reaches 13 since you can stack 12 and then a surplus of 2 half points, which helps avoid wastage of points, allows you to save an ultimate cast when needed, and can even do 2 consecutive ultimates if you want to. When you cast your ultimate, you select a target to first launch a barrage of 6 attack instances on. She can launch either her axe or sword attack, but there is a difference if the enemy is weakness broken or not. When attacking a non-broken enemy, her axe attack gets a damage increase and deals 1 hit, whereas when attacking a broken enemy, her sword attack gets a damage increase and deals 2 hits. So predictably, you want to use her axe if they're non-broken and swords once they're broken. The game auto-selects for you accordingly anyway. Then after those 6 attacks, she launches a spectacular finishing move. At Trace level 10, the total damage multiplier of all these attacks reaches up to 700%, and when coupled with buffs and debuffs, that's a lot of damage for 1 target to take. Additionally, her ultimate attacks ignore the enemy's weakness type, allowing her to deal universal toughness damage, and it gets a 100% increase in break efficiency if the enemy is not broken. So she's effective even against non-matching weaknesses, and since that's all on 1 target, she can deal a ton of toughness damage to help break them faster if necessary. Note that the ultimate attack does not generate an Aureus point though. Her ultimate is a very big portion of her total damage output, all while dishing it out in style. You want to be efficient with stacking her Aureus points to maximize its readiness and unleash her ultimate on the right target at the right time to maximize its damage potential. All in all, her kit is quite simple in concept, but the damage payoff is extremely strong nonetheless. With her Ascension 2 or A2 ability, when the battle starts, Feixiao immediately gains 3 Aureus points, which speeds up her first ultimate's readiness. Then at the start of Feixiao's turn, if she did not launch her talent's follow-up attack since her previous turn, this will automatically give her half an Aureus point. You will generally have other party members triggering her follow-up attack in between turns, so this becomes most relevant if there are any advanced forward effects from a teammate or simulated universe blessings that causes Feixiao to take consecutive turns, or perhaps some cases where her allies are disabled or didn't use attack actions. For her A4 ability, her ultimate is now also considered as a follow-up attack, so follow-up related damage bonuses will also affect it now, making certain relics, light cones, and blessings more compatible with her as well. Additionally, her follow-up attacks also get a 36% crit damage bonus, so that's both her talent and ultimate getting buffed. Pretty good. Note that this doesn't appear in the stat page. And for the A6 ability, using skill gives her a 48% attack buff for 3 turns. Also a really nice buff that's practically permanent. And finally, her technique is a fun one, as using it makes Feixiao trigger the onrush state, creating a vortex that pulls in mobile enemies and increases Feixiao's movement speed. No escape for those trotters now, and you can even smash destructible objects with it. Initiating a battle against enemies pulled in by Onrush will make Feixiao deal a guaranteed crit hit attack to all enemies at the start of each wave, and if more than 1 enemy was pulled in, the damage multiplier will increase, making it nice for rushing weak enemy waves. Just be mindful that if you switch Feixiao out, the Onrush state will end. Feixiao's minor stat bonus traces give her useful attack and crit rate bonuses and some defense. For trace levels, your top priority is her ultimate, followed by her talent and skill. You'll want to max all 3 anyway. Leave her base basic attack alone to save materials. Feixiao's already very strong without Eidolons, and they just mainly serve to further boost her damage potential. So for those who just want to push her limits, let's see what they do. E1 gets a stacking ultimate damage increase every time she deals her ult attacks, then it disappears after her ultimate. It's a good damage increase, but the next one is the more worth it breakpoint for those who want Eidolons. E2 basically adds a faster way to gain Aureus points. Every one instance of a follow-up attack from allies gives Feixiao 1 Aureus point, which can be triggered up to 6 times per Feixiao's turn. This highly incentivizes running follow-up attack-centric units with her who can get many of or max out the triggers, and doing so basically means you can potentially cast Feixiao's ultimate faster and more times in a battle. But again, you want follow-up attack allies to really make good use of this Eidolon, allies such as Topaz, Aventurine, and the like, and though not necessary, is a good stopping point for those who are aiming for early Eidolons. E3 increases her ultimate and basic attack levels. E4 makes her talent follow-up attack deal double the toughness damage and give her an 8% speed buff for 2 turns. It's only a stepping stone to E6. E5 increases her skill and talent levels, and finally, E6 makes her ultimate get a 20% all-type resistance penetration increase. Her talent follow-up attack is also considered as ultimate damage and gets a huge 140% damage multiplier increase. So either follow-up attack or ultimate related bonuses will affect both attacks now. Moving on to her relic build, starting with the stats. For general goals, you want to give her a lot of crit rate so that her single or multi-hit attacks will crit as much as possible. I'd recommend getting at least 80% crit rate. For crit damage, you could aim for at least 120% as well without buffs, and remember that she gives her follow-up attack and ultimate a 36% crit damage buff from her A4 ability. Of course, more of either is always nicer. Her attack stat can generally range around 2,500 to 3,500 outside of battle. It depends on your Lightcone's base attack and if you're running attack main stat pieces. Her speed depends on your preferred MOC breakpoints or team rotation. With just speed boots, she already gets 137. That hits the 134 breakpoint, which is already more than sufficient for fast enough MOC clears. So for the body, use a crit rate or damage piece, whichever helps you get a good crit ratio. You do want a high crit rate, so that might be a priority, but if you just have a lot of crit rate substats or buffs, then crit damage is perfectly fine. For the boots, speed or attack have their situational advantages. Having other speed buffers or advanced forward teammates can also affect your own preference. If you have viable pieces of both, compare to see which works best for you. For the sphere, go for wind damage or attack. Wind damage is generally a bit more preferable, but attack is close enough, and better substat quality will matter too. And for the rope, the only option is attack. Now for her relic sets. The Wind Soaring Valorous and Ash Blazing Grand Duke are her best in slot sets. The damage potential is very close. She makes full use of both sets' bonuses and fulfills their conditions well enough. It can basically come down to what's more efficient to farm for you and which of the sets you may already have the right main stats and good substats for. The Genius set against quantum weak enemies gives a big defense shred which is potent, but it's more restrictive, so I recommend just sticking to either of the previous options for universality. And for a temporary build, you can go for 2-piece combos of wind damage from the Eagle set, follow-up attack damage from the Duke set, or one of the attack sets. For planar ornaments, we have Duran, Inert Salsoto, and Izumo as the top options. Duran is a general best in slot, but Inert and Izumo are very close anyway and valuable if you need to improve her crit ratio, so any of them is already very good. Izumo just specifically needs another hunt teammate to get the crit rate bonus, which is fulfilled in some of her best teams anyway. Choose which has better farming efficiency and substat quality. The Glamoth and SSS sets are still viable runner-up options for her if you happen to have good pieces or need a temporary build. Now, let's move on to her Lightcone options. For the best free Lightcone, the Stellar Sea is once again highly recommended, being easily obtainable from her to store and giving high crit rate and attack bonuses. Remember to get the attack buff first by killing an enemy before using her ultimate to maximize its damage. For notable 4-star gacha options, a high superimposition swordplay is great for its high stackable damage bonus, which ramps quickly due to her multi-hit nature. Only Silence Remains is also fine and helpful for crit rate needs, though though generally less potent than the previous options. For 5 stars, her overall best in slot is her signature I venture forth to hunt, giving her very high base stats, a crit rate bonus, and most notably a huge defense ignore effect on her ultimate damage, which significantly amplifies her damage, more so if stacked with other defense shred effects. Baptism of Pure Thought is Reisha's signature, but its passive bonuses are actually very synergistic with Feixiao and a really good alternative to her signature, but has a specific condition to maximize. It gives a damage bonus, a defense ignore effect for follow-up attacks, and it has a stackable crit damage bonus that increases up to 3 times for every debuff on an enemy target. So to maximize it, you want to consistently maintain at least 3 debuffs on the target enemy, which will depend on your team and combat scenario. Another notable 5-star alternative is Worrisome Blissful, Topaz's signature. It gives crit rate and a follow-up attack damage bonus, and it applies the stackable Tame debuff after using a follow-up attack on a target. The debuff increases the crit damage dealt by any party member, so that's also a potential teammate damage increase. But if you have Topaz on the same team anyway, then just have Topaz use it. So for team comps and synergies, let's recap what Feixiao's kit wants. Since her Aureus point stacking speed largely relies on how fast her party can deal attack actions, she naturally appreciates allies who have a high attack frequency or who can enable more frequent attacks. Her teams initially lean towards a dual DPS template, but there are various possible options, like a hypercarry team, a team with 2 sub-DPS units, and for those who are attempting very fast clears, a sustainless team. Then as a traditional attack scaling DPS, Feixiao wants the usual array of attack, crit, and damage percent, and other relevant buffs or debuffs. Speed buffs and action advance effects also help, as that resets her talent trigger faster and lets her skills sooner to generate Aureus points faster. Since her ultimate also counts as follow-up attack, allies who can provide either both ultimate and follow-up attack bonuses will be well suited to supporting her too. Starting off, Feixiao has very potent combinations with other hunt units, with the most notable one being Topaz. Topaz and Numbi's attacks combined naturally result in very frequent attacks, and Feixiao's ult charges extremely fast due to that. Topaz's Proof of Death also increases the enemy's vulnerability to follow-up attack damage, and she gets extra buffing potential with her E1 or S1. She can also be SP positive when needed to help feed other allies' SP consumption. Aside from Topaz, Motza is a solid sub-DPS for Feixiao as well. He has a follow-up centric kit that lets him deal good damage and complements Feixiao's need for high attack action frequency. His second Eidolon also buffs crit damage to those attacking the enemy he marked. If you're pulling Feixiao, there's a good chance you'll get a copy, and he's a good alternative if you don't have or want Topaz. And there's March 7's Hunt form. March can grant her Shifu buffs to Feixiao, and her advance effect and follow-ups let her get in more actions than usual, though not as much as Topaz or Motza. March can also be used for breaking either wind or imaginary weak enemies, and she is going to be very SP positive since she'll just be using her basic attack after designating a Shifu. These sub-DPSs are generally recommended, but of course, don't be strictly limited by these hunt allies. Units with high attack frequency kits like perhaps Clara or an E1 Jade might have some use cases as well, and if you have them, you can always try out such combos. Feixiao's single target nature will be most effective and effortless in MOC, Apocalyptic Shadow, or boss-focused battles, but when coupled with strong AoE DPSs, or if there are certain pure fiction buffs that give your team AoE capabilities, there will be cases where she'll still perform well in pure fiction. For Harmony supports, Robin's synergy with Feixiao is incredibly strong. Robin's buffs all naturally benefit Feixiao, and they can also boost your team's damage, more so for other follow-up centric allies thanks to Robin's follow-up attack damage buff. Robin's additional physical damage trigger is also delivered through ally attacks, and since Feixiao and her allies naturally want to attack frequently, then they can proc Robin's damage more often too. Robin's advance forward is of course a huge factor, as advancing your party's turns means that you can charge Feixiao's ult even sooner before the enemy's next turns. Their kits just complement each other so well, making Robin a top-tier support for Feixiao. If you didn't pull Robin, there are other Harmony options of course. Team-wide buffers like Ruan Mei or Asta can provide their respective team buffs for other teammates. Ruan Mei might be occupied for your Break or Dot team already, but she still works fine with Feixiao. Hypercarry buffers like Bronya or Sparkle will give big buffs and help advance Feixiao. That will affect your speed tuning goals for her, like running an attack boot with a very fast sparkle or running Bronya at -1 of Feixiao's speed. Nihility debuffers are also an alternative to help amplify your team's damage. Jiao has his potent vulnerability debuffs. Pele's defense shred is always nice. That being said, if you have Robin, I highly recommend her as it seems she's the most potent support for Feixiao right now. And for sustain units, the best ones are of course those who, aside from sustain utilities, can attack frequently, provide relevant damage boosting buffs, or even both. Aventurine is a top recommendation as he can spam his follow-up attack and boost your team's crit damage on top of his resilient shielding, and he becomes all the more potent if you combine him with compatible buffers like Robin or Topaz to further boost his follow-up damage. Gallagher may be suited for a break-focused team, but he still works nicely with Feixiao thanks to his basic ult combo, more so with a fast build. Being very SP positive also addresses much of your SP needs. Other sustains can still do the job of sustaining your team, but they don't have the attack frequency and defensiveness that these two generally bring. So for a very premium team, Feixiao, Robin, Aventurine, and Topaz have extremely high synergy with one another and just plows through the hardest content. Even Robin and Aventurine will contribute quite a good amount of damage despite being supports. From here, if you don't have specific units, you can slot in other alternatives mentioned to assume their roles. These recommendations are not exhaustive or definitive, so feel free to try different teams according to your preference and see what others suggest. And lastly, for some auto battle notes, Feixiao's behavior is simply to use her skill every turn and cast her ultimate as soon as she has at least 6 stacks. As long as your team synergizes with giving her stacks, then she can easily pop off. A minor issue is that she might use her ultimate without having all the relevant buffs active yet, such as ulting while Robin's ult isn't up yet. Then she seems to prioritize targeting the strongest enemy, which is mostly fine, but can run into some issues where you really need or want to target the minions first. For example, this Aventurine boss fight in Apocalyptic Shadow wants you to destroy his dice first, otherwise Aventurine has very high damage resistance. But in the auto battle, Feixiao kept on using her skill and ult on Aventurine, so in such battles, just manually pilot the team. But in all other cases, it'll do the job really well just because she's ridiculously strong. In MOC Floor 12, I was able to 0 cycle it manually with her premium team, while the auto managed a 1 cycle clear. And that's it for my guide on this insanely badass general. So let me know in the comments if you're pulling for her and what you think of her so far. If this video helped you out, don't forget to leave a like, subscribe to my channel if you haven't already, and I will see you all soon. Take care!